Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek UK. I'm Elizabeth Wiredu, PRWeek's news reporter. Today I'm joined by Clara Biu, Head of Consumer Communications at Allwyn, the operators of the National Lottery, and Laura Gillen, UK Managing Director of We Communications. Both Laura and Clara are involved in this year's mentoring programme from Women in PR and PRWeek. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you. Yes.
So today we'll be discussing a crucial topic, progression and leadership for women in the industry. This is such a big area to discuss, so I'm going to jump straight in with my first question. So Laura, when you first started out, what did you realistically imagine your career path to look like, and did the reality match the initial vision?
I'll answer the question saying, no, it definitely didn't match the initial vision. I came out of university having done a really broad degree, business and finance, not having really a Scooby what I would go and do afterward. And actually, I will admit that I didn't even know really what PR was until I took a receptionist job at a technology PR agency about 20 years ago. And through that, I kind of fell into PR, I guess. And once I found my feet, I realised there was loads of things about it that I just loved. It was really engaging with people. I was like quite a hard worker. I was quite ambitious. I was able to do fun things. I was traveling. So that was kind of, I guess, what took me through my early journey of comms and PR. But I think when I got to kind of some later stages, I kind of was able to go and have discussions around the direction of my career. But I don't think it was ever kind of planned out per se. So I'd say that I often, talk to my team about you don't necessarily have to have a big plan of what you're going to do next, because often it can kind of fall through opportunity and kind of what's in front of you.
And Clara, did yours match the vision?
Absolutely not. I think we've had very similar experiences. I think what I would say is that when I started out, I was quite naive. I thought it would be quite a linear path, work really hard, get promoted, move up the ranks, maybe go from an account exec and end up as a comms director and, follow a very well-trodden path. And I think what's been interesting in my career and probably the career of a lot of people listening is that we have lived through so many incredible sort of changes to our industry and also unprecedented times. So, for example, I have seen the advent of social media and now influencers and AI and LLMs, and also lived through the pandemic. And so with that, it's all transformed comms. And so actually I think about sort of 21-year-old me, I don't think they could ever have imagined a role or an industry as varied and complex. So actually I think it's been a lot more exciting than I thought it would be, and certainly not as linear as I thought it would be.
Amazing. So what was the moment where you realised you were ready for your next big promotion? Did you develop any skills, or were there any experience signals that suggested it was time for you both to move up?
I suppose for me, again, this probably talks to sort of my lack of very proactive career planning. My early progression was very much a sense of, I'm not sure if I'm loving this role anymore. I'm ready for a change. It felt like a very simplistic question. And with that, I moved agencies, and that would come with a little bit of a pay rise. I don't think I ever sort of sat there one day and thought, aha, I'm ready. And I don't know, maybe it's just how my brain works. And I think if you are someone that benchmarks yourself against others, it can often be a bit of a trigger point when you see someone you consider to be your peer suddenly moving forward. And I think that's something I've experienced, where it suddenly, or someone leaves, or someone gets promoted. And I think those moments can make you suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, well, what do I want? What's next for me? And those are the points that make you sort of think, well, am I moving in the right direction? I think my telltale signs have always been feeling like you're well and truly in your comfort zone. So if you're not learning, if you're not progressing, if you're not growing, that's probably a sign that you're ready. I think the one word of warning there is that there are moments in your career where it's absolutely fine to be in your comfort zone, and you shouldn't always be go, go, go and what's next. If you've worked really hard and gotten yourself into a great place where, you've got a handle on what needs to be done, you're valued, you're trusted, you're loving your job, you can have 3 to 6 months in your comfort zone, that's fine. But if you are feeling like that you want more, that's when perhaps you need to be thinking about promotion.
I think for me, I've kind of done 2 big stints at agencies. I've kind of not moved around a huge amount. So I've kind of, probably there is kind of moments in my early career, my later career, that kind of is, I had not maybe aha, but kind of realization, I guess. I think when I was kind of earlier on, it's probably kind of quite subtle, but just suddenly you turn around and like, oh wow, I just led that project on my own. Or suddenly, you know, the client's coming to you only, or you're suddenly leading the calls and all those kind of things as those kind of telltale signs. I think later on, I always talk about is suddenly when people are coming to you to figure out the tricky stuff, and you're making, like, I always joke about being like chief problem solver, but you know, you're kind of figuring out how to go, you know, be an agency problem, but kind of the bigger issues. But I think that's probably, the kind of signs that I kind of would look at.
So when it came to asking for a promotion, I know it can be difficult for some people. How did you approach that conversation? Did you have a strategy behind it when you were like, I'm ready, I feel like I need to be promoted, my line manager must know as well?
That line is the critical bit. My line manager must know as well. That is not true. If there is one thing you need to understand, is that people are busy with their lives and their worlds and trying to get through their day and their careers. They're very rarely, and I say there may be a few line managers who are actively thinking about their team, but they're very rarely waking up thinking, right, I think such and such is ready. What am I going to do today to promote them? Completely unprompted. And you just need to kind of realise that in as much as we'd love to just work really hard and hope it gets noticed, you have to advocate for yourself. And so it does need planning and preparation. What I would say is that first and foremost, you need to understand your business. And this is perhaps a kind of in-house view, but organisations typically will review pay once a year. And with that, there will be a promotions process and there will be pay bands. And so you need to really understand what's realistic. You know, where do you currently sit in the pay band? Where can you get to? I have had instances before where people have sort of gone away and done like market averages and crunch numbers. I'm not sure how they've got to this number, and suddenly what they're asking for is 20% more than the top end of their pay band, and it's just not feasible. So I think there is an element of understanding what's in the realm of realism. I'd also encourage you to talk to other people who have got promoted. Actually, they've probably got the most recent insight and tips, like what do they do? How do they win it over? You know, what can you learn from them? And then the other thing is, once you have that, it's timing. I honestly think you need to give yourself 6 to 9, possibly even 12 months lead up to this. This is not a one-time conversation. This will be a string of conversations that you need to be having, and you need to set yourself up for it. And you need to see your manager as a partner in this. You need to give them all the information that they could possibly have to fight your corner. And for that, you need to speak in commercials, and you need to kind of prove your worth in terms of the business value. Sometimes people say things like, oh, I'm saving up for a house. And you're like, yeah, that's nice. And I wish you the very best with that. But let's talk about your role, you know. What are you contributing and how are you going above and beyond? And make sure that you're really able to separate kind of your personal circumstance and the business value that you contribute.
I would say that's like remove the emotion of it, because that's not how the business is going to say yes or no, is it? And I often say, to your point, it's like there should be no surprises in promotions. Like I'm always really shocked when someone's either surprised they did or didn't get a promotion. For me, something's gone wrong there that hasn't been part of the discussion the whole way. But I think to go in and, you know, show what you can bring to the table. I often talk about, you know, when I do my review, it's not often about what I've achieved. It's about where I want to go next and kind of what I want to grow into. That for me is what's really interesting. It's kind of just, that's what I've had client back me up if I want something, you know, like looking at kind of what I can bring to the table. But I think the important piece around understanding the environment you're operating in, particularly in this current place that we're in the industry, it's not as maybe simple as times previous either, to kind of get what you need to get. And so the other thing sometimes you go into these conversations is you need to be ready for maybe the answer that you might not wish for. So, and kind of, you know that, you know, have a kind of other route of plan. So if that's the answer you're going to get.
Speaking personally, how have you approached the situation for yourself? How have you asked for a promotion, or haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely asked for things. It's not always been like a promotion. It's been pays, it's been positions, it's been job titles. Sometimes I've had the answer I want and sometimes not. But I think everything that we've just said, I would always go in with a really kind of business case of why we need it and why now, or even if it's not a now, it's where I want to move to. And even when I became, I've now become MD, but I started having a conversation with my previous boss probably 4 or 5 years ago about the kind of route and direction I wanted to take, be it kind of more in the client piece or kind of business management. And it's been a bit of a journey versus an overnight piece. And I think that's, you have to just have some guts, I would say, to go and have the conversation. We do need to normalize the ability to talk about pay. I think sometimes so many times the worry about the conversation is so much worse than the actual conversation itself. But being kind of ready and prepped, I think, is the biggest tip I'd have.
So what would your top tip be for a junior colleague about to negotiate their first major salary bump?
So many. I have so many top tips. Okay, firstly, do your research and understand your environment. Secondly, pull together your business case, and for that you need kind of really clear list of your achievements. Some people call this a hype folder that they might have in their emails or on their phone, and it's kind of really just charting moments where you've got really brilliant praise, where you've kind of delivered something and that you can talk to the commercial impact of that. What you're wanting to show is that you're going above and beyond. Being able to show that you're doing your current job really well is actually not enough. And, I think this time of year, lots of people are having end of year reviews. So actually you're going through that process of gathering all your evidence, as it were. You should really be doing that in real time so that you have it ready to go. I would also say that you need to give your manager advance notice. So, for example, you could say, in our next one-to-one, I'd really love to talk about progression. What that does is give them time to go and talk to HR and be like, right, this person wants to talk about progression. Where are they on their pay grade? If we wanted to give them something, what could we offer? Like all this stuff so that they can be prepared and it's actually a productive conversation. I would also kind of follow up with everything in writing. And so the question you should be having when you have that conversation, asking when you have that conversation is, right, this is where I am now. What do you need to see from me in order to get there? And then chart that somewhere. It holds you to account. It holds your manager to account, agree a timeline. I keep saying that this is a joint effort. I think sometimes people either kind of feel like it's us versus them, or like I've got to go off and do all this by myself and then have a ta-da moment where I kind of present my case, and it has to be a team effort with you and your manager. And I think clarity is often the first step, because I've also seen instances where people have just poured time into what they perceived was really important, and it's just not important to the business. It just wasn't. And it's actually kind of heartbreaking, because actually once you have the clarity of what you need to do, that will empower you to kind of deliver. And to the point of perhaps not doing all the right things, you agree it's 6 months' time, you go back for your check-in, and the answer is still no, perhaps because of market conditions or where the business is. I think that it doesn't mean that you can't get something. So at that point, I think you need to be prepared to think about what your trade-offs here. So if you can't get a financial reward or a title change, for example, could you actually kind of look at your working patterns, and could you do a 9-day fortnight for the same salary? Could you actually ask for some training, which actually you will benefit from long term, and it's giving you something? Could you work on a certain project that you've been really excited by, and will help propel your career? I think you need to kind of have things up your sleeves if you really want to stay in that business and you really want to progress, but right now you can't get what you need.
To your point, I think that's what we've often done when we think someone's not quite ready for that move, despite it might be that in their goals they feel like they've ticked things off, but it's kind of, I guess, just that maybe more in a competency or behaviour-led piece that they're not quite there, but we've maybe invested in one-on-one coaching. Or I actually think this is a great place to go and talk to your mentors, actually, in this whole environment, but kind of make sure that they have some support around them that kind of feel like they're still moving forward, be it if it's not necessarily always about pay, I guess.
And actually, depending on what your organisation offers, is it coaching, is it mentoring, how can you feel a sense of progression? Because I look at some of the applications that we had for the Women in PR mentoring programme, and there are a cohort of people who feel that they've reached a certain point in their career and they're not really sure where next. And actually, they've spent the best part of their early years just moving up that ladder at pace, and they've perhaps gotten to a really great position. but it's not as fulfilling as it used to be, and they know they still have so much more to give, and they love this industry, but clarity is the piece that's missing, or just sort of that kind of having a sounding board of someone to talk to about where next and where should I pour my energy into. Because I think progression is really interesting, because it's not, in my mind, the same as a promotion. There are many ways to progress your career. And there are people who I have conversations with who know full well what's required if they take that next step up. And they're just a bit like, I don't want to do it yet, because, you know, I'll do that when I'm ready. But for now, I want to kind of go broaden my skill set and try lots of different things, and really kind of feel like I'm stretching myself and enjoying the job.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point, and we often talk about this, like, particularly in agencies. I think there's this like rush to the top and, you know, people are always kind of like, it's quite a linear path in some regards if you choose to go that way, but actually just to sort of sit and grow at a level, because it's just nothing worse than being promoted too soon. And I think I've done that myself, actually, and it's not actually a nice experience sometimes if you're not quite ready for the role. And I think sometimes people get lost in that, and actually if we can, as leaders, create environments that people can feel like they're moving forward in different ways, I think that is a really important way forward. I
think you're so right. I think we need to really normalize the fact that they're very different definitions of success for different people. So often it feels like success could either be a job title or a salary, or being at a certain company that's super prominent, and more often, and I'm seeing this perhaps with more junior people coming up, it's success is a lifestyle. You know, it's being able to still kind of have time for your hobbies and interests, have time to sort of see all your friends and maybe exercise or train for a marathon, or kind of, you know, have a lovely relationship. You can't, I think gone are the days where you just pour all of yourself into work. It doesn't mean you're not ambitious. You definitely still want to kind of feel successful in that you're progressing, but it's just not as clear cut as it used to be.
What does success look like to the both of you?
Oh, that is a good question. I think increasingly I am leaning more towards lifestyle. I feel like, what's the point in working so hard if you can't enjoy it? But again, I'm a firm believer that you can feel and two things at once, and sometimes it can feel very binary, because I love what I do for work. I love leading a team. I love working on amazing campaigns, and that is a huge part of who I am and what I want to continue doing. I also have lots of different areas of interest outside of my day job, and also I live a very rich and fulfilling life. And so for me, success is balancing all that in a way that works for me.
Yeah, and I think it's about the chapters of your career as well. I think I've got a toddler at home, keeps me very busy, and I think, albeit I've got a bigger job than I've ever had in some ways, I feel like I'm able to the boundaries piece is really important. And that, for me, if I'm doing that well, that is success to me at the moment, because I feel like I've probably got to a place in my career that I'm like on a learning journey now as a leader, and I feel like I'm sort of at the start of that journey. So now it's about, how do I live the life I want to live with my family and still enjoy it? I think that's, sometimes we don't talk about it enough, about how much we just need to actually remind ourselves to have some fun at work, you know, and that's another part of success for me, if I'm enjoying my team and my clients and all that around me, I guess.
How did you personally set those boundaries? Because it can be quite a difficult thing to do, and it can be quite overwhelming and daunting as well.
It is difficult. I won't pretend that it's not. And I think there's in different parts of my career, and I guess since having children, that's, you know, changes it again. But you just have to really work at it. And I think, again, I've been really lucky. I'm fortunate enough to work in an environment that's quite female oriented. I'm in a female founded, mostly female run business that kind of is kind of like a family oriented culture that supports that. But actually, you know, I've had to work really hard actually, and look at, you know, I want to set the kind of example for my team. So that kind of drives me as much as anything else to kind of create. I truly believe I'll turn up my best at work if I'm able to kind of make work for me. And that's kind of I guess the goal that drives me. But you just have to be quite strict. So I always talk about an example of an old boss of mine. We went into a pitch, quite a big pitch, and the client was running late, and we just sat down, and she was like, right, I got to be out of here by 5 because I've got to pick my kids up. And I remember being like, whoa, her saying that in this environment. But actually, everyone was like, yeah. But I just think having the confidence and, you know, if you've got people around you doing that sort of helps. But it's looking at what those things, and everyone's got slightly different boundaries of what's important to them. Mine is flex. That is just the thing for me. And maybe if I can kind of build that and, you know, set my diary up and things like that. But you have to be quite stern in supporting that.
I really like that. I'm moving on to a less upbeat question now, but let's address the penalty that many women face if you've had to take time off or reduce your hours for family or personal reasons. Did that impact your opportunities for progression?
I think it's important to just recognise that there are many, many examples of where women have perhaps felt kind of they've been held back because of either sort of caring responsibilities or sort of working part-time. I think my personal experience has been slightly different, and I'm really keen to promote and normalise sort of positive examples of this, because I know that there are a lot of people who perhaps would like to work flexibly but don't because of a fear of this, or perhaps cut short sort of caring breaks because of a concern about the impact it will have. And so in my kind of personal circumstances, I've had a maternity leave, I've had a sabbatical, I've had a career break, I've worked part-time, and I have still been able to progress my career. I don't say, to say it's easy. I just want people to recognise that it is possible. And I think the key things that have always helped is having a great network and community around you. So I'm on the committee for Women in PR. I'm a member of Black Comms Network. And I think having those sort of people in that community that understand this industry and but they are separate to your day job, is just invaluable in times like this, because you can have sort of a sounding board for certain things. I also think it's really important to think about how you build relationships beyond your immediate team within your work, so that when you're out of the workplace, you don't seem to kind of vanish out of everyone's minds. And it's thinking about, who are your allies in the business? Who are you spending time with to kind of raise your profile with, and so that they can advocate for you when you're not in the room? Again, sort of looking at some of the applications that we get for the mentoring program, a lot of people apply when they're starting to think about starting a family, and they want to sort of get themselves into a good place so that if they are out of the business, or whether that is on maternity leave or they are returning and they're coming back working sort of 4 days a week, they've set themselves up for success. So a lot of things that they might talk about with their mentor is, how do I really kind of communicate all my achievements before I go? How do I build this network, before I go? And how do I stay in touch without feeling that I'm still thinking about work in this precious time where I want to enjoy with my family? And how do I kind of just feel like I'm not despairing? Because I think, again, if you are someone who worked really, really hard and have poured a lot into your career, it can be quite daunting and it can feel very high stakes. But actually, I think I want to encourage people to say that there is a way for you to do it. And likewise, if it's not a maternity leave, which I'm very clear that is not a break or relaxing, you should be able to take a sabbatical. You don't, you should be able to take a career break. If you feel like you need it, then you should talk to your employer about it. And I think my experience of having both a career break and a sabbatical is that I have come back with renewed energy. I have like a refreshed sense of focus and priority. I have a clearer sense of what I want. And actually, I've been so energized about the role. And so, again, it has done nothing but wonders for me.
I also taken a couple of sabbaticals and a mat leave, and I actually am surprised I don't get more asks for sabbaticals. I feel like it's just not as commonplace anymore to go and just do some traveling or whatever it is you choose to go and do. But I think they have been real. That's the reason I've been at WE for 14 years. And I think it's because I've had those moments to go and have those kind of few months off here and there. So that's one thing. To go back to the mentorships, for me, mentorships have been a really important part of how I think, progressed and have had those kind of side discussions outside of your day to day. And I've had like a series of kind of official and unofficial mentorships. And that's why I was so eager to take part in the Women in PR program, to hopefully give back a little bit to people, because I do think it can be hugely beneficial as you're figuring those things out, to just talk. And I often talk now to old colleagues that are kind of going through it, because they just want how did you do it, all that, because the kind of just, the learned experience, I think, can go a long way in helping you kind of progress.
Well, thank you for answering that question. I was thinking, Laura, what's one tangible change the PR industry needs to implement today to better support women going through critical life stages like maternity, career breaks, miscarriages?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads that needs to be done. Gosh, we could probably have a whole session just talking about that. But I probably would go back to this point of, how do we build environments that allow for kind of flexibility unapologetically? So like just the kind of ability to, you don't have to negotiate, the trust is there, you can just go do it. Because I think kind of all the systems in the world, but without that flex to allow you to kind of make work for you, I just don't think any of the rest of it will work. And I think, again, I feel quite lucky that I've been in this environment that I can do that. And I think I truly then can turn up in a way that I am my best self by kind of flexing. And even before I had kids, I always loved a bit of flex. I'd work from home on a Friday before COVID and all those things. And kind of like, I don't really like commuting in rush hour. It just stresses me out. So I kind of go in early or late and I just work my way around that. But I think that's, a big part of kind of what we need to kind of create as a stable. I think when I look at my own team, I think at a leadership level, we've got it nailed. We're all mostly working parents. We kind of support each other. I think there's still work to do around how do we empower the junior level to feel like they can make those decisions and not feel like they're slammed into the kind of 9 to 5 or whatever it is. I think there's work still to do there, but I'd say that's probably the setting for everything.
How would you give your junior members of staff more confidence to take control of their career?
I think some of it is just about sort of the education piece. I think sometimes it's just like the unknowns, but there's not enough communication. So we're in this big effort at the moment to just kind of be a lot more transparent in how everything is and what we're doing and why you're doing it. And sometimes you just need to tell people, and then, hopefully there'll be some champions within a group that would then lead the way. But ultimately, I think you can guide people some way, but I think it's enabling structures to do that. So, for example, we're a global business, so we work a lot with the US. So if people need to leave to get childcare, it's really hard to do 5-6 p.m. calls. So we just have to be quite strict with our teams in the US about how to do that. So it's just some guidelines and practicalities around no early or late calls, and we're trying to finish early on a Friday and making sure that that's kind of really, there's no client meetings at that time and things like that. So we can kind of put the settings in to allow you to just go do it without complexities.
Clara, what's one tangible change you'd implement?
I think it's a mindset shift. So I think all too often people forget that two things can be true at the same time. So yes, you could be going through a pregnancy loss and still be ambitious. Yes, you could be going through fertility treatment and still want to progress your career. Yes, you could be going through the menopause and still, be striving to kind of want to get that next promotion or that progression. I think all too often people think it's either one or the other. And I think that binary outlook is really holding people back. And so it's really recognizing that ambition and a kind of desire to progress can still exist in very tricky transition phases throughout your career. And it's how they show up and how you can support people to still achieve their ambitions, with everything else going on. I think I think menopause is really, and it's not just the menopause, I think it just having an older workforce as well is something that our industry needs to be much better at. Our data is showing that ageism is appearing in the workplace younger and younger. Women as early as 40 are kind of sensing that they are feeling kind of perhaps left out on the big pitches or working with a shiny client, or perhaps, their level of ambition has been assumed to be, less now. And I think what I would encourage people to do is, treat women as individuals and actually talk to them and see what does that individual want? What is it that they are striving for? And how best can you support it? Because I think often we have policies and we spend a lot of time writing the policies, and then we file them away, but we never actually live them. And I think if we can live our policies out better, that would create that environment and that structure for people to thrive. And so, yes, have those one-on-one conversations, really understand what success means to each of your team members and the role that you can play in that. Obviously, that conversation has to be driven by the individual. And I will always say the people I have found easiest to support with their development are the ones who sit me down and they're like, right, Clara, this is what I want. And, we don't encourage that enough. And I think people think that that's a bit brash, that's a bit direct. No. But actually, I'm busy.
I really respect it.
Yeah, tell me what you need, give me clear instructions, and I will go and bat your corner. And don't assume I have all the time in the world to figure stuff out. And, we are comms people. I would encourage people to communicate better so that we know exactly what you need from us and how we can support you.
And I think particularly as women, I think we have a habit of maybe over-explaining, over-egging. And I'm often like, we don't need a TED talk. You just lay it down and tell us what you want. Because I think men do it easier. And I think, that's something we can all take away, I think.
Now you're both in leadership positions. What real world changes have you put in places in your own organisations to make progression a lot clearer and more equitable for the women coming up on your teams?
Yeah, I would say actually an exercise we're going through at the minute is kind of overhauling kind of how we do our goals and our processes and looking a lot more at kind of competencies at different levels. And we've actually kind of recently in the last few months collapsed our structures, so we're less siloed now, and that's kind of opened up. So it just, your goal's not written depending on who your manager is, and you kind of there's a wider feedback loop. And I think that in itself is kind of inputting. A plan is for that to kind of input much more fair and consistent and kind of visible view on kind of what levels are for men and women, right? So it's not, it should, we're a mainly female team, but it will impact both. But I think the other layer on it is, as kind of leadership, we're trying to be much more transparent, as I was saying earlier, kind of explaining kind of the wheres and the whys of what decisions we make around promotions and the kind of progress and things like that. So just, we do things like monthly town halls, but actually, I'll do like a mid-month update, or I'll go into the nitty gritty of where things are at, and kind of we have like a peer group council that people get together to try and just unpick some of the kind of things to kind of share more information so people know why we make decisions. So I think sometimes it's the why can help then, if perhaps it isn't a decision someone wants to hear, it can be a bit kind of clearer and fairer.
That sounds really helpful. And Clara?
I think the best example for me is that I have a non-exec director role where I advise an agency on ED&I, and part of the work that we have carried out together is really kind of having a full review of how we kind of employee benefits. So from everything from parental leave, flexibility and all that, we've looked at that. But I think the key changes was transparency in promotions and progression. So we published all the pay bands so everyone could see it. There was a clear promotions and progressions process. Everyone's really clear as to like what they need to hit in order to be considered. We published the parental leave policies on the website. So if you are considering a job at that agency, you can find out all the information. You don't have that awkward moment of kind of like asking in the interview, which is just, which in some cases is absolutely fine, but there will be certain instances where you will be discriminated for asking that question. And also it's recognizing that people need different support at different stages of their career. And again, it's not just for women. It's thinking about offering coaching for all levels. Again, there are many moments where people are kind of thinking, what next? What do I want to achieve? Where do I want to turn my attention? And then also recognizing for more senior women, how can we kind of give them more sort of like sort of a different type of coaching, supporting with perhaps certain challenges that you face at a different life stage. And actually, I actually think both mentoring and coaching are such powerful tools, because I think that there is a perception that only junior people need mentoring and only executives need coaching. And actually, there's a real fallacy there, because I think you can benefit from both at any stage of your career. And in fact, with the mentoring program, we've got the biggest age range with this year's cohorts. Our youngest intake is 24 and our oldest is 44, and they're at completely different stages of their career, but they both have something to benefit from it, because we're all working that much longer, and it's almost feeling a bit like, how do I keep strategizing? How do I reinvent my career for it to still feel fresh and exciting to me? And also, we're still facing hurdles that we want to get over and overcome. And so that's where it really comes in and helps. So again, I would suggest coaching and mentoring at any stage of your career could be really beneficial.
You've mentioned being like a non-exec director, and this leads perfectly onto my next question. Once you've reached like the highest ranks of an organization, how do you keep on progressing? You've mentioned one way, but are there any other thoughts?
For me, it's all about, again, comes back to what your definition of success is. And if you are someone who has lots of different interests, it can often be the case that you can't often exercise those interests in your day job. And so you might find actually having this brilliant day job that is rewarding and exciting and stretching is fantastic, but also you might want to do something pro bono, or you want to take on an advisory role, or you want to give back. And actually more and more people kind of have benefited from something as they've come up the ranks, and now that they're at the top, they want to kind of repay that and almost pay it forward. And so again, I would encourage you to think about, how can you give back? I think PR is quite transactional in sort of industry. It's like, we have relationships, with media in order to get coverage. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes actually, how can we think about what we're contributing to the long-term future of our industry? And so thinking about giving back is what I would think about, and whether that is in an advisory capacity, whether that is mentoring, whether that is working with a good cause that you really support, or whether that is just being part of an industry community. I think a lot of people find it very enriching.
I think I'd add to it, I think, I'll talk from my personal experience, it becomes less about position and more like, for me, it's like just keep the kind of growth learning journey mindset across along the way, and it being part of Women in PR mentoring group, or getting out and going to conferences and learning and like just seeing new things and hearing new perspectives. I think that's been a big part of it for me. I think as an agency leader, we talk a lot about just your own thought leadership and having a point of view in the industry and helping maybe navigate some of the industry's problems. It's all part of kind of making you a bit more of a rounded leader, I think. And I think it's an endless journey, but I guess you have to pick and choose what you need to do to get there.
I completely agree. I just wanted to know, looking ahead 5 years, what are your biggest questions or concerns about where you think you'll be in your own career?
I can't imagine 5 years' time. I honestly can't. I think there is so much going on. There's so much rapid change in this industry, which I absolutely love. And I sometimes think I can't even predict what it'll look like in 18 months, 2 years' time. I think for me, it all comes down to doing brilliant work that I'm absolutely proud of. It's being a great leader, whether it's leading a team or sort of supporting others to achieve their ambitions or their definition of success. And I have to enjoy it. It's just not worth it if you're not enjoying it. So I think that's all I could probably say, because I think, I think about where we started this conversation, which is like, how did I think things would be when I first started my career? And I got that very wrong. And so actually, I think that anything could happen in the next 5 years.
I think for me, some of the things I think about a lot is, I grew up as a client servicer, and that is what I'm inherently really good at, I think. But obviously, as you become an agency leader, it's like, how do I continue to grow but still stay in touch and hands-on a little bit with that? And that just sometimes a bit of a tension point. I just think about, what does that look like longer term? But then, you add to that, it's very hard to think about next month, never mind 5 years at the moment with everything else. And I know we promised not to talk about AI, but, the world is changing around us, like on every level. And like you say, I think what I'm committed to, though, is kind of trying to keep a kind of like abundance versus scarcity mindset about it. I was actually talking to an intern on a New York office the other day, and she was like, what are you most excited about, like, in your career? And I was like, you could think about all the things that are happening around us to be quite scary, but actually it's quite exciting. We're going to be part of a massive change, whatever happens. And, I think I'm part of an agency that's really trying to like meet the moment in terms of what we're doing as an agency to kind of get wherever it is we got to go. But trying to have a kind of optimistic approach to it, I think, is what I'll be focused on.
Well, thank you, Clara, and thank you, Laura, for speaking on today's podcast. And I'd like to thank everyone else for listening. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.